When a crisis erupts, teachers are right there on the front lines. But it's not just for their students. It's a battle inside their own minds, too. So a new study decided to dig into the psychological armor that protects educators in these incredibly tough situations. What can we learn from them? Well, in this explainer, we're going to map out the key factors that build a teacher's resilience and see how those insights can help support educators really everywhere. Emotional and sensory overload. I mean, that's how one teacher described it. That phrase just cuts right to the bone, doesn't it? Try to imagine creating a calm, safe space for kids when your own world is just saturated with stress and fear. This is so much more than a job. It's a psychological marathon.
So that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? What is it that allows an educator not just to get by, but to keep doing their vital work? What are the internal resources they draw on, the outside support that helps? Let's unpack the science behind it and find out what really makes the difference. Okay, first we have to really get our heads around the unique spot these educators are in. Researchers call it a dual challenge, or even a dual war. See, they aren't just citizens living through a crisis. They're also professional caregivers who are responsible for guiding kids through that same crisis. Just think about that for a second. You're trying to manage your own personal stress, your family's safety, but at the same time, you're expected to be a rock, a pillar of stability for students who are going through their own trauma. It's a kind of professional demand that requires a totally exceptional level of resilience. This is the real battlefield. So, what builds this incredible resilience? Well, researchers went looking for the specific, measurable psychological tools, the things that could actually predict who would cope the best. They wanted to find the real game changers. You could almost call them psychological superpowers. But before we reveal those superpowers, let's make sure we're on the same page. The study defines resilience as this amazing ability to keep a stable equilibrium. It's not about being totally unaffected by things, no way. It's about being able to leap back after you've been knocked down by something stressful or even threatening. And the first major predictor they found? Psychological flexibility. Now, this is about having a positive outlook on change and seeing yourself as someone who can adapt. You can imagine, in a situation where your lesson plans or even where you teach could change overnight, being able to bend without breaking is absolutely critical. Next up, optimism. And we're talking about more than just having a sunny personality here. The study found that just a general expectation for positive outcomes, that tendency to look on the bright side, was a seriously powerful protective factor for these teachers. And the final core predictor was mindfulness. But what's really fascinating here is that the researchers found that a lack of mindfulness, just operating on autopilot, was a strong predictor of lower resilience. So in other words, being present and aware is like having a powerful shield. But these psychological superpowers are really only part of the story. To get the full picture, the researchers went straight to the source and asked the teachers, what are your biggest challenges? And what are you actually doing to cope? Let's listen to what they had to say. As you can see from their answers, the biggest struggle, by far, was emotional and mental health. That was followed by frustrations with the system itself, and then good old professional burnout. It just shows you the battle is being fought on the inside, the psychological front, and on the outside against systemic problems. This simple quote just says it all, doesn't it? The lines get so blurry. The emotional energy you spend in the classroom spills over into your home life, which is already under all this strain. It's this relentless juggling act where dropping a ball can have really serious consequences. So how do they cope with all that? Well, the answers are pretty incredible. The number one resource, as you can see, is family support. It's all about connection. Right behind that is faith and spirituality, which can provide a real sense of meaning. And check out number 3, routine. In the middle of pure chaos, the simple act of keeping a schedule becomes a lifeline. I love this quote. It's just so honest. It tells us that resilience isn't always some heroic, conscious act. Sometimes it's just about putting one foot in front of the other because you have to. It's the strength you find in the day-to-day rhythm when everything else feels like it's falling apart. Okay, now this is where the findings get even more fascinating. These psychological tools, optimism, mindfulness, they don't work like some kind of uniform shield. The study actually found that how effective they are can change depending on who you are and what you're up against. So let's take optimism. While it was a big deal for everyone, the data shows that the positive connection with resilience was even stronger for male teachers. it also got stronger with age. And that's a key insight, right? It suggests that the best way to support teachers might not be a one-size-fits-all approach. It needs to be tailored. And what about mindfulness? The study found something that seems a little backwards at first. Its protective power actually seemed to go down as trauma exposure went up. The researchers think this might be the mind's way of adapting. I mean, when you're facing a constant extreme threat, maybe being hyper-aware of every single negative thing isn't helpful. Maybe the mind just adjusts its strategy to survive. So what do you do with all these pieces? You've got the hard data, the personal stories, and all these little nuances. Well, the researchers synthesized it all. They built a single, powerful framework to explain and, more importantly, support teacher resilience.
They call it the psychoeducational Iron Dome. It's a great metaphor, right? It's an integrative, multi-layered defense system that's designed to protect the well-being and professional spirit of teachers, especially when things get really tough.
And this model shows exactly how all those pieces fit together. See, real resilience isn't just one thing. It's built in layers. At the very core, you have those individual resources we talked about, like optimism and mindfulness. Then that's reinforced by interpersonal support, like the family and colleagues teachers said were so important. And finally, it's all held up by the larger organization and system. So the big takeaway here is that this becomes a practical roadmap. To build this dome, you have to work on all the levels. For the individual, you can offer training in things like mindfulness. Interpersonally, you build strong support networks. At the organizational level, you need leaders with empathy and manageable workloads. And system-wide, you have to provide access to mental health resources. It all has to work together. And this brings us to the final and most critical question. Yes, this research came from a very specific, high-stakes conflict, but the principles, they're universal. Teachers everywhere are under immense pressure. So the real question for all of us is, how can we take these lessons and start building a protective, psychological iron dome for the dedicated educators right here in our own communities? Not just in times of crisis, but every single day.